I want to welcome everyone to day 4 of our 5th annual TMF week. We have a super exciting session that I'm going to be introducing in just a few moments. My name is Steve Lubell. I'm a senior account executive here at Montreal, joining you from our beautiful head office in downtown Montreal, actually Old Montreal, specific. Before we dive into things, just want to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. All sessions are going to be recorded and they're going to be made available to all of our viewers at the end of the day. All of the attendees are going to be receiving a certificate of attendance for the entire week of TMF week, not just for the individual sessions that you're attending. We are going to be addressing at least, we hope, most of your questions at the end of the presentation. And of course, after every presentation, we are going to open up our lounge. So we encourage everyone to come and visit and have some great conversations with your cohorts around the world. So what is the timeline for today's session? Our amazing guests are going to be presenting for 30 minutes, and I'm going to be introducing them in just a second. After their presentation, as I said, we're going to open up the floor to questions and answers. I will then be introducing the next session, and following that, we're going to be having the networking break, as I said, in the lounge. Virtual cocktails are okay. So without further ado, what are we going to be talking about today? We're talking about metrics that matter, leveraging data and drive process improvement. We're joined by the amazing Zencore team of Sandra Dodd, Colin Noble, Denise Harris, and Gabriela Bere. I was going to do it.
You got it.
So without further ado, I will hand it off to you guys, and I'll see you at the end of the session.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Aviv. As he mentioned, we are the TMF Operations group from Zencore. My name is Sandra Dodd. And before we get into our presentation, I'll go ahead and go through our disclaimer, legalities. So the views and opinions expressed in the following presentation are those of the individual presenters and should not be attributed directly to the views or policies of Zencore or any organization with which the presenters are employed or affiliated. So you can go ahead and go into the next slide, Colin.
Let's see.
And then one more slide. Perfect.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and go through the introductions for each of our team members shortly, but I do want to just make a little note that our job titles may not fully capture our roles within the TMF, but each team member does bring a unique skill set and experiences that drive our success. So I'm the proud leader of our group, and I'll have each of our team members go ahead and share their roles and responsibilities, what their experiences are, and then their bios afterwards. Okay, so my name is Sandra Dodd. My official title is Senior TMF Operations Manager. However, I'm the head of our TMF Operations group at Zencore. I do bring over a decade of leadership experience in clinical trial oversight and TMF operations. I ensure clinical trial management standards are being adhered to. One of my primary responsibilities is aligning operational strategies with organizational goals. So I work with senior leadership just to make sure that whatever we do in the TMF is really in alignment with our company goals as well. I have led teams in previous jobs for all stages in clinical trials 1 through 3. And in my current role, again, I oversee our TMF operations group, and I drive initiatives to optimize eTMF efficiency, quality, and compliance. So I just have a few bullet points here for what my primary responsibilities are as head of our TMF ops group. I just supervise the TMF operations staff and the functional activities. I lead the development and execution of TMF processes, and I serve as a subject matter expert to cross-functional team members, including CRO and vendor personnel. Go ahead and go to Denise for her introduction as our document quality manager.
So my official title is Manager of TMF Operations here at Zencore. I've been with the company coming up on 6 years now. In the industry, approaching 30, TMF centric for 10 to 12 years, I want to say. The majority of my role here at Zencor is related to TMF quality, both of the documents and the location of where those documents are being filed. I also do the role of primary trainer for our indexers and some of the end users. So training's a big thing. It's actually my favorite thing to do. I love it. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Denise.
Yep.
And then Colin, you're next.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, everybody. I'm Colin Noble. I'm the eTMF System Manager. I guess my official title, Senior TMF System Admin. I'm the only one, but the most. Anyways, I've got 4 years of experience at Zencor. I think I've been in the group second longest, next to Denise. So Denise, interviewed me pre-COVID, and then joined right after.
Right after.
So I manage, the system stuff, the technical aspects, the functionality. I implement system enhancements, configure system updates, and analyze issues and things related to system performance, all that system stuff.
He's our systems guy.
Yeah, that's a much more succinct way of describing everything.
Perfect. And then we have the lovely Miss Gabby, who's sitting next to me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabby, or Gabriela Barrayesa, and I have 9 years of experience in clinical research. I started off at the clinical research side doing recruitment and made the full circle into the sponsor side. And primarily, my responsibilities here at Zencor are to analyze cross-functional TMF review findings, generate metrics and reports for the study teams for them to be able to see the overall health of their TMF. I escalate any high-risk TMF issues and help develop plans to resolve any discrepancies that we might find in the TMF.
Perfect. Thank you. And then go ahead and go to the next slide, Colin.
Clicked on it. Okay, there we go. There we go.
So just as a brief overview of what we plan to present today, I will be interviewing each of our TMF Ops team members, and I'll be asking them questions regarding their personal experiences associated with changes prompted by the evaluation of TMF metrics and reports. So as I mentioned earlier, each of our team members does have a unique role within our team. So they'll be able to offer those unique perspectives regarding the consideration and any challenges they may have experienced when it came to implementing the 3 actions that are listed on this slide. So the first action was eTMF system changes. The second one is CRO/internal scope adjustments. And the third one is new business processes and tools. So we'll go through an example of each of these actions and what TMF metrics had really led to these actions. So we'll do 3 examples of that. And then our 4th example, which is probably the most significant one, does incorporate all 3 of our core TMF metrics, as well as a combined enhancement with all 3 of these actions as well. So we'll have 4 examples for you. And then each of the team members will be able to share their unique experiences.
There we go.
So for our first action, eTMF system enhancements, we do have an interesting example of how we evaluated the TMF quality and QC rejection reports, which led to a simple system change. After we transitioned indexing to a new CRO group, we knew that we needed to evaluate their performance in the eTMF, but Denise raised some concerns about how to evaluate that performance as it impacted her role directly as a trainer of these new indexers. Denise, can you please explain what your concerns were?
Sure. As Sandy mentioned, I'm responsible for the training or the retraining, as the case may be, for the indexers. We all know how that one goes. So, aside from evaluating their overall performance, we also needed an easy way to identify what errors they were making so we could really see what retraining may need to be required. And the reports that we had at the time weren't really showing that, like the true reasons why things were being rejected.
Perfect. Thanks, Denise. So I do want to clarify that we already had a QC rejection process that was in place, and just some background on how that worked. Essentially, what we would do is go into the eTMF and select a reason for rejection from a pick list within the eTMF system. And then documents would then be bucketed into specific rejection categories based on what we selected from that pick list. Once they were bucketed into those categories, you could pull a QC rejection report. So Denise theoretically could use that to identify what errors the indexers were making. But after reviewing those reports initially, Gabby, again, she's our quality analyst, took a closer look and she suggested that we make some changes. Gabby, can you explain what changes we wanted to make?
Yeah, so after, we reviewed the existing QC rejection report, we quickly realized that our current drop-down list of QC issue types needed to be revised. There were too many QC issues that were assigned to our miscellaneous, like other issue bucket. So we needed to look into the content of each QC issue to identify common reasons why the documents were being rejected. So we needed to revise the existing pick list and include additional categories once we were able to narrow it down, right? Which were these other issues that our uploaders were, or other issues why the documents were QC rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thanks, Gabby. So Colin, as our system administrator, can you explain what changes you made in the system that was impacted by these suggestions that Gabby made?
Yeah, this was a very simple thing from the system side. I just took the drop-down list of reasons why things could get rejected and added a few more options. And it just really whittled away at that section of the pie chart of QC rejection reasons that was previously just other, it just whittled away at that. And now it's just more granular, specific reasons. It's easier at a glance on those reports and those dashboards to just, look at it and see why things were being rejected without having to click into, okay, let's look at the specific comments for everything that was bucketed into that other, right? Because that's a lot.
Torturous. It's torturous.
Well, I don't know. Well, sure.
It is for me.
Yeah. So for my end, that was really simple, and just retraining people on, how to interpret those reports. But those were very straightforward reports, I would say. But just added to the list.
Okay. Thanks, Colin. So I guess what would we say were the results of the changes that were made in the system and the new reports that were generated?
Well, I know for me, it was a lot easier to really identify where retraining was needed. When you have everything sort of in this big other bucket, you're having to, as I said, it's torturous. You have to go through line by line, find out why things are happening. Right. And once we broke it down more, it became a lot easier for me to really gear the training or retraining into the areas that were needed.
Yeah, I think that just also these changes led to faster resolution, ultimately resulting in improved quality and completeness. It was really effective. I think it really helped us out a lot to identify where the issues were.
Perfect. Thank you. So just to recap on this first example, we did say that the trigger for us looking into and applying these eTMF system enhancements was the quality metrics. The actions that we took to ensure those results were configuring the eTMF system to include a revised pick list for rejection reasons. We updated the QC rejection reports accordingly and then trained all CROs and internal teams on interpreting these new dashboards and reports. Okay. Colin, go ahead and go to the next slide. We have a second example, which is related to the scope of work adjustments. So for this example, we were reviewing our overall timeliness reports, which led to an adjustment in the scope of work for our CRO and our internal groups. For clarification, our overall timeliness reports really measures the time from when a document is finalized. So for example, when a document is signed to the time that a document is approved in the eTMF. So what we've noticed is that our our timeliness was in red across the board. But Gabby does generate our monthly TMF dashboards and reports, so she can probably expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so after running the monthly dashboards, we continue to notice that our timeliness was always in red. So from personal experience, I used to do primarily CTA work. So a lot of the documents were coming to me. So I knew that the documents weren't being processed. I mean, they were being processed quickly right after upload. So the delay was coming from the front end. And before it even made it into the system. So we quickly realized, after investigating what was going on, we quickly realized that the content owners were using various repositories, and instead of uploading their documents directly into Viva after they were collected or finalized, right? So this caused a lot of additional delays, and it also created some confusion amongst the uploader because they weren't sure, what did we already upload to Viva? What haven't we? What is yet still pending from our repositories, which, also created more duplicates and a little more work for us.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Gabby. Denise, I know that you managed a lot of the duplicates and you managed the TMF quality in general. Can you explain how the dual storage, so documents being in the eTMF, but also being in these external repositories, had caused confusion that led to these duplicates, and how you manage that?
Well, a lot of it is when you're having documents in multiple repositories, it's really hard to determine what's the source of truth. We all know that that's kind of where we're gearing most things towards in the TMF. So, duplicates get identified. I was receiving a lot of deletion requests. I handle all of that because they were uploaded in this outside repository. Somebody was going whoever the assigned uploader indexer from our CRO was assigned to go in and pull them out and upload them. Well, if they remained in that outside repository, then somebody else might go in and upload it again. Or the other hand was the content owner has put them in the repository. In their eyes, it should be off of the missing document report that we were generating, but it hadn't made it to the TMF yet. So as in our eyes, it was still missing. So that was really a problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point. So maybe we should clarify that some of these external repositories we didn't have access to ourselves at Zencore. Right. So we lacked visibility into, what was truly uploaded there, which was causing that duplication because we couldn't see that it was uploaded in that external repository. But we also didn't see that it was in the eTMF. So they just kept being marked as missing. And sometimes we would have team members that, wanted to resolve that missing issue or finding sooner. So they would upload that document, and then later the document that was in the external repository was transferred in the eTMF as well, which caused the duplication. Denise, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that, or?
No, I think you covered it really well with that. Okay. A little clarification is always good.
Perfect, thank you. Colin, so can you share with us what we did in the system to address those issues that we identified?
Yeah, so we just really, encouraged users to just upload directly into the TMF. So I guess to that end, we wanted to make it as simple as possible for everybody. So it was sort of an easy sell, right? So the expectations for the uploaders, we really minimized it. We wanted them to just drag and drop their documents in. They didn't have to classify them. They didn't have to really input any metadata that was, something that could be identified on the document itself, right? Just keep the burden as minimal as possible for the uploaders. And then also provide, our indexers, who at the time were, CRO users, presumably indexing documents being uploaded by their, coworkers. We wanted to give them a lot of remediation tools within our eTMF inbox. So we wanted it to sort of, mirror what they were able to do in their repositories, so that they didn't feel like we were really,
changing it up too much.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to be a pretty simple transfer and process for them. So we gave them a lot of tools. We put some workflows into our inbox so that they could, communicate with one another, raise concerns, respond to concerns, things of that nature, so that we could just get them to upload directly into the TMF and avoid those external repositories, which, you know, I'm sorry to admit, Denise, I've done that before too. I know it's one of your biggest pet peeves, and I've kept quiet, about that until now, but I've done it before, and I apologize. Yeah, so it was, it really was just making it, I guess, putting more like burden on the indexers and making it as easy as possible for the content owners so that they just drag and drop into the system and then just kind of call it a day. So that was, you know, and that obviously, you know, sounds simpler than it really was, but, you know, at the end of the day, that was the rationale, and that's what we did.
Yeah. And then it also comes with like the documentation that needs to be made after those changes occurred, right? Because we did change the scope of work for both CROs and our internal groups, because our internal groups were also using external repositories sometimes to perform their QC and then uploading it into the eTMF. So we didn't just train our CROs, we also trained team members internally. But from a CRO perspective, what we had to do was document that change and update our CRO budgets and contracts to reflect their change in scope of work. As Colin mentioned, we needed to train them on how to do direct upload in the eTMF, but we also had to update our TMF plans to reflect these changes, and any study plans that indicate, you know, like how documents were going to that external repository. We need to remove those line items and then add in additional language just indicating that each function was responsible for doing the simple, you know, direct upload to eTMF. Colin, could you expand on what the results of these changes were? So we made all of these changes, and what was the overall impact at the end?
I mean, timeliness just went up across all studies. You know, even if there were, like, for example, we would frequently have documents uploaded very late if they were going through rounds of QC within those external repositories. Getting those into our system, even if they needed to go through those rounds of QC, we had immediate visibility into it at that point. So the timeliness in getting documents uploaded and ultimately approved as well, you know, drastically improved. But I would say the biggest improvement was between that document finalization date and the created date, which is the date that was, you know, when it's uploaded to the system. So big impact on that. And then obviously, I think, you know, what Denise was talking about, duplicates, fewer duplicates. You know, we use really Viva. Yeah, when you upload a document that's an exact copy and a duplicate, it tells you. So it's a little bit, you know, I guess it keeps it pretty simple in identifying those. So.
Yeah. And just to piggyback again on something Denise mentioned earlier, it also established the eTMF as the single source of truth, right? So instead of having multiple repositories, we would point to the eTMF and say, this is where all of the documents should be. It also, you know, increased document visibility because the documents were available sooner. So it resolved a number of issues, which was great. Again, it was something that was generated based off of Gabby's review of the timeliness metrics. So that's what informed us to make these decisions.
And really a deep dive into that timeliness metric, right? All those like data points you get throughout the process. Gabby just went like, well, let's look at the finalization date versus the upload date. And that was where the problems were. So good job, Gabby. Thank you.
Yeah. Able to pinpoint it. It was, the delay was at the beginning of the process and not towards the end. So we made adjustments to make it better. Okay.
I'll go next.
Thank you. So our next example is related to new business processes. So we have an interesting issue that Gabby identified during the study closeout process that led to us revamping and establishing new business processes surrounding TMF reviews. Gabby, would you like to expand on what you noticed?
Yeah, so there was always a consistent trend during closeout studies for the overall completeness to drop, and sometimes to even drop like significantly. When closeout began, a lot of documents began to be identified as missing, right? So that tanked our completeness. So at the time, only ClinOps was performing scheduled TMF reviews. So we thought it would be a good idea to involve all the subject matter experts and have each of them perform their own scheduled TMF reviews for their respective zones, right? So once the reviews from the SMEs began, they identified many items and marked them as missing that actually should have been filed long ago, right? So once they started doing that, it became a much easier process. And ClinOps was trying, I mean, they were doing their best really, but they're not the subject matter experts. So you really don't know what you don't know. Right. So yeah, that was very helpful.
Yeah, you only know what you know. So there would be like sections, for example, like data management or safety, where our ClinOps team, would do their best to review those sections, but really we needed input from our data management and our safety groups. So just to clarify what Gabby was saying earlier is that ClinOps was doing the reviews for all documents in the TMF, and then our subject matter experts weren't coming in, like the functional groups weren't coming in until the final TMF review where all of these missing documents were identified, which is what tanked our completeness. Denise, I don't know if you have anything additional that you wanted to share regarding
well, it's kind of
documents that were
identified. At that point, they've suddenly identified a lot of documents that should have been in the TMF well before that. And so we get the big document dump, and then the timeliness is tanked because things are egregiously late. So we needed something to change.
Right. So that's a key piece I think we wanted to mention as well, is that, it really started from evaluating the completeness reports and Gabby noticing that, hey, why is it such a significant change at the end and closeout? But then also they brought up a good point about how later we were able to assess timeliness and how it impacted timeliness as well. So started with one TMF metric and then it also kind of, overlapped with others. So Denise, what was the proposed solution? We identified the issue, but what did we propose to do about it?
We all thought it would be to everybody's benefit if TMF reviews by the different cross-functional groups were conducted throughout the life of the study. As Gabby mentioned, they're the subject matter experts. We only know what we know. And if it's not our area of expertise, we don't know necessarily what's missing. So we wanted all the functional groups to be doing their reviews throughout the life of the study instead of just at the end.
Right. Yeah. So how do you feel that the cross-functional teams felt about this added responsibility? I mean, we know that they have, their day-to-day tasks that they already have to manage, but now we're asking them, can you please also add the TMF in the mix and prioritize that and do periodic reviews quarterly or semi-annually? How do you think that they felt about it?
I think at that point, most of the teams had gone through some really painful closeout reviews. I mean, really painful. So they were pretty receptive at that point. They were like, if this is going to make my life a little bit easier down the line, I'm on board.
A lot easier down the line.
A lot easier.
Yeah. So that's exactly, I mean, we had their buy-in at this point because they were tired of, at the very end, they had like days of review, hours and hours of reviewing because they hadn't reviewed, those documents previously because the reviews were conducted by ClinOps. So now that we had their buy-in, we really wanted to figure out exactly how we would roll this process out. We needed to establish regular frequencies for the reviews. So, meeting with each of the functional groups to ensure that we confirm, are you able to do these quarterly? Are you able to do these semi-annually? And then establish clear and consistent parameters for how to do the TMF reviews. And yeah, I think, Colin, did you have anything you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, as with enticing people who don't normally work in the TMF to work in the TMF, it's not the bulk of their job. You have to make it a little, just make it easier for them if possible, a little more intuitive. So I guess, in trying to accomplish that, we put together a very standardized TMF review tool that's really based off of a report that they can generate prior to conducting the review. Reports being like an inventory report with really intuitive prompts, like, document, upload date, right? We want, hey, I want to look at documents that were uploaded from this date to this date with maybe the start date of this round of reviews being the end date of the previous round, right? So there's no overlap. We didn't want to just give them a complete inventory list of what's in the TMF and say, good luck. Hopefully you didn't review, enjoy the duplicate work, So really just providing like obviously study filter, site, country, document types, classifications, if applicable. But ultimately, that date range was pretty crucial so that we could instruct them, like, make sure you don't have overlap or else you're going to do double work and you don't want to do that. So just making like a really standardized report that gets pulled into a tool that everybody uses just to make it that a little bit easier. So that was, this was more of a process thing than a system thing. I'd say making a report is a pretty simple, it's not even a change, but just, a tool to provide to everybody. But I think the reception was pretty positive about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, Gabby, so next question's for you. What was the overall result? So we made these changes, we updated, our TMF processes, and Colin made changes to the reports and NVIVA. What was the end result?
So before we did this, the completeness metric was always like throughout the life of the study, it was always like at 95, 100%, which didn't always feel like it was very accurate, right? So after we made this change, the completeness metric was actually lower throughout the life of the study. But we took that as a good sign because it meant that the documents were being properly identified as missing and also being submitted into the TMF in a timely manner, as opposed to just waiting until closeout. Yeah. So we took that. We were okay with that with our metric being a little lower because to us, it just meant that we were more actually inspection ready.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point and an interesting one, right? Where everybody's aiming to be as close to 100% as possible across the board for completeness, timeliness, and quality. And then in this, instance, we were very close to 100 in most cases until we got to closeout, where it just completely dropped and went in the red. So previously, the TMF metrics for completeness, it showed, close to 100, but it was kind of like deceptive. Yeah, misleading, right? So now that we've made these changes, our metrics are more reliable. So it shows us a more accurate representation of the TMF completeness. So now maybe it's a little bit lower, but again, like Abby said, I think we're okay with that. It's lower, but it's more accurate. So we know where to make adjustments because things are being identified sooner by the people who know to identify them.
Right.
Exactly. And timeliness tends to go up because things are being identified sooner than closeout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, right.
I know personally, generally speaking, timeliness is, always something we all struggle with. So having it identified sooner rather than later really helped out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I think this sort of like idea that you were talking about, Sandy, where the completeness being lower is a good thing. It's very odd, right? Might be a tough sell to
right.
TMF metrics at a glance. They might think you're just being ridiculous when you say, well, I'm happy to see it go down. But I think, just because I think it probably makes sense to everybody here, right? Like, yeah, of course, if you're not going to know you're missing things unless you know, and then that's a good thing. That's where all the work is in identifying things is missing. Yeah. And I think this idea also extends to quality as well. I mean, if your quality for your TMF is 100% every month,
we know that's not. We know that.
Right? I don't know what the right number is. There's no perfect number. 100's not right.
100's not right.
So it's like, I think that's why context is so important. Like, you can look at these things at a glance, like for Denise for the retraining, looking at the reasons things are rejected at a glance, great. But I think generally speaking, looking at metrics at a glance, you need to understand how they're generated.
What they mean, what they really mean.
Yeah, what they mean. You can't just leave it at quality and then thumbs up 100%.
Move on, I'm done.
Yeah, you have to understand what the process is behind that metric so that you can really understand, I don't know, like the context. So it's like, we don't really have like goals for these metrics necessarily because we just want them to be accurate. Like just be as accurate as possible to inform our process decisions. If we need to change something, it's good to know, right? We're not living in, I don't know, some La La Land or something like that, right?
We're in San Diego, not LA, just to make that.
Yeah. So I do want to be mindful of the time. So if we could go to the next slide, Colin. I do want to just tie this back. We tie this back into the objective and, like what we're really presenting on today. So we went through 3 different examples, and then we'll go ahead and go through our biggest example after this, our 4th example. But I do want to just go through some of the steps and just the overall importance of leveraging these TMF metrics. So on this slide, you'll see a list of 8 steps for kind of implementing like a TMF metrics program. It's a little bit small for me, so I have to zoom in here. So for the first step, it's really identifying what your key performance indicators are, or what your KPIs are, and the TMF metrics. The second one is to set clear targets. So what are your thresholds? Do you want to say that you want timeliness to be always above 80%? And is that good enough? Do you want quality to always be above 80%? Is that okay? The third step is developing a KPI tracking method. So here at Zencor, we do monthly TMF metrics. So Gabby will generate the TMF review report or TMF reports, and then really take a closer look at the dashboards. And then she disseminates that information to our CROs and then the internal functional groups. And then 4th is integrating KPIs into daily operations. So what we really want to focus on is the steps after this point where, okay, you have your reports. Now, what do you do with them? So it's really important to have just a regular review and analysis process in place. So Gabby, after she runs the reports, like I said earlier, she takes a closer look at, like what areas are in red? What are some high risk issues that we need to manage? Why are these issues happening? Understanding what the root cause is. And then for number 6, just adjusting strategies based on the KPIs. So if we've identified that there is an issue with timeliness, for example, she may work with that study team to say, hey, we need to make an adjustment here. This is my suggestion for how to do it. And that's number 7, communicating results and feedback to the relevant stakeholders. And then number 8 is really just continuous improvement. So once you get past that point of, sharing that feedback with the group, then it, establishes or fosters like an environment where continuous improvement can occur. Okay. And then we'll go through our last example, which is probably our biggest one, which combines all 3 of the changes that we mentioned earlier, which was the eTMF system changes. It also incorporated scope of work adjustments for CRO and internal groups, and also involved new business processes. Not only did it involve all 3 of those different actions, it also involved all 3 of our core TMF metrics, which are quality, timeliness, and completeness. So I'll go ahead and go through some of the issues that we had identified previously.
Sandy, I'm sorry. I kind of want to check in with Aviv and Kim and just make sure time-wise
that we have time to go through this last part. We're all talkers. We all
Yeah.
I don't know if they can.
Because I know we need to leave
on
time. We need to leave
For
time
questions.
for questions.
Yeah.
So I'll lock them in, but we're all good.
All
right.
good. Okay.
All right, we can keep
Perfect.
going.
Thank you. Okay. So the big change that we were talking about is recently we brought indexing in-house. So I know that earlier we were explaining how we had, a number of issues surrounding outsourcing TMF indexing. And what we decided was to bring indexing in-house. Some of the issues that we experienced were that we had, CROs managing various TMFs. They weren't just in Zencor's eTMF. They were managing various different systems with different processes. So sometimes it was they weren't consistently adhering to Zencor's TMF nuances because they're familiar with so many different processes. So bringing that in-house kind of addressed that. And then outsourcing also hindered quick process improvements in the system when it comes to system changes and training. So if we were communicating with CROs from different regions, for example, we wouldn't be able to do on-the-spot training like we would if it was in-house because we had to, coordinate schedules because they were in different regions and then make sure that they were trained accordingly. So I know I'm trying to be mindful of time, so I don't know if anyone else from our team just wants to go through the actions and what the results were.
Yeah, the text is so small on my screen. Let me get real close, uncomfortably close. I mean, yeah, I guess I'll speak to the system side kind of quickly. These kinds of things were interesting in that it allowed us to streamline certain things in some ways because there were fewer hands. Like having external indexers meant you sort of had to make sure they were sending things to you and then it goes back to them. There's a lot of back and forth, right? But when it's really all kept internal, you can simplify those things pretty substantially. So in that sense, it got more simplified. However, we also added a lot of nuances that we really couldn't when it was outsourced, I guess, right? Because Denise's point, you can't really train and retrain as easily when there's that time zone difference. They're also working in multiple TMFs. Like they're not just working in
our Zencor way.
Our Zencor one. So we'll say quirks or nuances that we want to have that are really complicated, they just get lost eventually, right? Like it's hard to do things so drastically different in ours. And one example of that was sort of like a gradient for managing like QC issues, so that they're not all treated and bucketed exactly the same. I know we already talked about all these categories, right? But depending on the category, you can also treat it differently, right? If it's a very minor issue, you can train an internal indexer like, okay, if it's a minor issue, do this flow, something like that. And then we can consider it, quote unquote, kind of finalized, right? With a note. Whereas, if you can't really train on that level of like nuance if they're working in other TMFs where that's not the case, right? So we can make it a little more unique and quirky and fit to our needs. So I think that's the biggest impact for a system. I'll be quiet the rest of this time, I think. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just know that for me, training people like everybody's brought up, it was so much easier when my indexers are in-house. It's, we're in the same time zones. I don't have to worry about it. Those little changes are so much easier to implement, at least from my perspective. So
yeah, because you can just ping them and just say, we're all on the same time zone, ping them, hey, can you address XYZ? Or if we're in office together, poke them on the shoulder and, hey, a quick question. It's a lot easier than having to schedule a whole different meeting to address things.
A whole lot easier.
That's a good point. Gabby, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
I think the one thing that, just living in the metrics, but one thing that we had to adjust, like once we brought indexing in-house, we couldn't really evaluate the indexers in the same way anymore, right? So a good example of this was the quality metric. So we first needed to separate the quality of the indexing versus the quality of the documentation that's being provided. So once we did that, it was clear where the deficiency was. So it became easier to evaluate what is an indexer problem as opposed to what is an uploader problem. So we adjusted workflows and metrics. Workflows and metrics needed to change to accommodate the change in responsibility. So beyond quality, timeliness was impacted as well, because now we were looking at the pre-upload timeliness as the definitive CRO evaluation for the timeliness metric. So that was something that I think
those are all
impacted.
Good points. Absolutely. So I think that just went through our actions, but we also kind of tied that into what the end results were. So just to recap, the end results were that it enabled faster implementation of system process changes, increased efficiency and consistency by applying the same process across all studies. We improved TMF metrics, like Gabby was mentioning earlier, which had better indication of what the root causes were for TMF issues. And then it also reduced overall outsourcing costs. So because we were managing it in-house and we didn't have to spend as much time with training CRO, for example, we actually reduced costs significantly by bringing it in-house. I think that's all that we have, unless the rest of the team wanted to share.
What's on slide 14? Up. Okay.
Questions and answers.
You're allowed like this much time for it.
I don't know if I'm on the screen yet here. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you. Yep.
Guys,
There you are.
that was awesome. And I think we need to let the audience know that you are joining us from the West Coast. So it is 6:30. Well, not anymore. But you guys did start at 6:30 in the morning, and you guys did a really, really awesome job. I don't know how much time we have for questions. I know We don't have much, but I'll ask a few questions. So this comes from Judy Tonkin. For direct uploads to the TMF, and I'll actually share it on the screen here. For direct uploads to the TMF, was there a quality issue resulting from CRAs working in the field?
Mm-hmm. So were a lot of quality issues identified in our inbox? Yes, a lot. So that was part of it. We had to make sure that we kind of treated, so we used Viva, right? I think I mentioned that earlier. And there's like a separate sort of inbox where documents are housed. They're not quite classified, indexed, et cetera, right? So we wanted to separate the sort of like QC workflows that we put into the inbox that our CROs were using. We wanted to separate that metric from ultimately what they pushed through and we evaluated and rejected, right? Because we had to, kind of pinky promise them, right? We're gonna, these metrics are being captured, but they're not being held against you, right? What is happening in the inbox, we want to give you the same level of freedom as you had in your external repositories. So it's not really, I guess, fair to do that and then, say, oh, you guys are, having so many QC issues in the inbox. As long as by the time it gets indexed and we have that earlier visibility into the documents, we were happy with it. So
Yeah, I agree.
All right, fantastic. We have another question here from Cheryl Marone. With regards to emails, are they uploaded into the system as PDFs or MSGs, and how do you manage those straight to TMF in PDFs?
It's a combination. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, no. So we tried to tell content owners and uploaders that we native format's the best. So we try to keep it in message format if possible. If they do send it in as PDF, it's not the end of the world, just as long as we also have any attachments that may have been included in the message. I'll let Cullen go ahead and explain how, the system aspect of it and how we get those emails into the eTMF.
I mean, we allow them to upload the emails the good old-fashioned way, but we also have a forwarding address that people just send it to. They just send
for our
email.
Internal users.
Yeah, for our internal teams, we have them just send it directly to an email that gets forwarded to the Viva inbox. So just both.
All right. Yeah. Fantastic. We'll move on to our next question from Revelin Opar. Is the TMF index aligned to the ISF? Sometimes there arises issues on where these file-specific documents, especially for multi-center studies, where requirements for essential documents differ. Let's try and read that one again.
Well,
is the TMF index aligned with the ISF?
I know. The index is kind of where I live, but I don't have any insight into how the ISFs are formatted at all. Yeah. So, we're relying very much on, we use a CRO to do all of our site monitoring. So we're relying on them to help out with that mesh. I can't think.
Well, our index is, I guess if the question is really like the formatting of the index, our index is based on the reference model.
Yeah,
so it follows the same structure as that.
Yeah. And then we do have like a column that indicates required or not required. And if we know that we're going to point to the ISF to say where this is where it's stored and it's not in the eTMF, we have that comment section as well, Denise, where it says this can be found in the ISF. So in short, yes, it's modeled off the TMF reference model, but it also incorporates the ISF.
Okay. We'll go on to our next question. And Kim on the backstage, let me know when we should move forward, introducing the next sessions. So this one comes from Alexandra. When the document is being considered filed on time or late, is it 30 days from document date to document being approved in the TMF?
Yeah,
like the ongoing
very interesting discussion. And then now, business days or calendar days.
It's such a tough.
I think Sandy's probably most appropriate to speak to this one.
Yeah, so right now we're at 35 calendar days from when a document's finalized and approved in the eTMF. To be transparent, we are thinking about whether or not we want to adjust that based off of monitoring frequency, because we know that our monitors don't always get to the site within 30 days. Like some of our monitoring plans indicate that it'll be spaced out, 6 weeks to 8 weeks, some 10 weeks, right? But it really depends on if they have communication in between visits. that maybe they can collect these documents. But if they're not able to provide, they meaning the sites, aren't able to provide documents in between, then we may consider expanding that. So for right now, we're at 35 calendar days, but considering expansion, but we're discussing internally with our TMF steering committee.
All right. And I think we'll have a few more questions here. Do you have a TMF risk analysis dashboard so you can see the risk across all projects? For example, and that question comes from Helen Price.
We're all smiling a little bit because that's been a hot topic for us. I know Colin and I have been talking about this extensively, but we are in the process of implementing a risk management plan. We know that with GCP R3, E6 R3 release in the draft being released, and that they're focusing on risk-based management. So we're planning to put something into place. We don't have it all ironed out quite yet, but it's in the works.
All right, and I think we have another great question from Helen Price. Give me a moment, I'll share it here. Do you measure volume of queries and query responses rates with a target timeline?
I don't think volume of queries. Okay, we measure volume of queries, but query response time, not necessarily. I think ultimately it's really just like baked into overall timeliness, I guess. We don't really have like a separate metric. That information's captured, but I don't think that's something we really like put together.
We haven't
like
been really tracking it, no.
Yeah, but ultimately that is reflected in overall timeliness, right? From document up or generate finalization. Document finalization to document approval. If things are taking a while to get remediated, man, talking about timeliness, there's so many checks. I feel like such a nerd time.
We do have it like from outside of the timeliness perspective, we do have it for like QC rejected items, right? Where those are managed by Denise initially, right? And then our CRO counterparts in the TMF group, where if things aren't resolved within 90 days, they would go to Gabby, who then performs like an escalated follow-up. So it's not necessarily quantifying the volume. Obviously, if there's like a huge number of QC rejected documents, that would be considered like a high risk issue potentially. But as far as like escalation and timelines, is like as soon as it gets to 90 days, hasn't been resolved, Gabby is now following up with the appropriate team members.
Mm-hmm.
Great, and we'll move on to our next question. Did the direct upload of documents to the TMF result in an increase in quality issues, considering that the CRO's QC process outside of the TMF was eliminated?
I think I already kind of addressed this question. It really it depends. The answer is no after it's really been considered like in the TMF and classified, right? Because all the remediation is happening in our eTMF inbox. By the time they got classified, presumably they were pretty clean. Or they were as clean as they would have been if they had been remediated in their external repository.
It was just a way for us to have more visibility into the documents being uploaded, and it really did help with the timeliness.
Yeah, but I would say the QC metric that we actually look at and really present on was not negatively impacted by it.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we have for the Q&A session. Guys, you were absolutely awesome. I see the comments in the chat. This was an extraordinary, very informative and insightful presentation. So thank you, all four of you, for joining, especially at such an early hour in the day. It was really, really nice. And you guys deserve to hopefully take off a couple of hours this afternoon and relax a little bit.
I second that.
Probably not going to happen, but I perspire. With that, I think we'll see everyone in the next session. Again, thank you guys.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much.